Welcome back, everyone. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. Thank you all for tuning in again. This is episode number 16. And today's show is going to be a little shorter. I'm going to get straight into it. I'm actually just going to do two different topics today. For one, I'm going to do my first NBA top 5 and worst 5 rankings. Obviously, unlike the NFL, there's not weekly gaps where everybody plays the same amount of teams, so it won't be the same type of consistent basis, but every 2 to 3 episodes I will redo the top 5 and worst 5 NBA rankings, just like I do the NFL top 5 and worst 5 rankings every 2 episodes. So, we're going to get into the NBA top 5 and worst 5 as of today. And then we're going to get into my picks for Sunday. Again, my picks include the pick 3, the lock of the week, and my underdog pick of the week. So, let's get into it. So, to start, we got to get into my first top 5 and worst 5 NBA rankings. Now, again, this is as of this episode. Right now, it is Sunday morning, November 2nd. So, obviously, by the time this airs tomorrow, it could be a little bit different, but this is as of right now. So, let's get into it. So, at number 1, we got to go with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Right now, OKC is 5-0. They've played really good competition, and they've looked really consistent in every single game. SGA is continuing his run that he had last year, where, in my opinion, he actually should have been the MVP, considering where OKC was projected before the season and considering that they finished with the best record in the toughest conference. But that's neither here nor there. He has continued to show his dominance this year, showing that he deserves to be a first-team All-NBA player, and he is leading them to wins. To me, though, the most impressive thing so far about OKC has been the improvement of Chet Holmgren. You know, they usually say that in year 2, you can actually see the biggest change as far as where a younger player is going to project to be. And I think Chet Holmgren has actually stepped it up, not only offensively, but defensively. He's actually averaging 3.8 blocks per game. And of course, yes, because of his height, that does make it a little bit easier, but he's very active around the perimeter too. And his length inside affects shots constantly, what gives them a different component than I felt like they had last season. So with them being one of 2 undefeated teams left, they do deserve to be the number 1 seed right now. At number 2, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are the other team that is still undefeated. They are currently 6-0. They have actually shown to have a lot of depth. They just came off of a huge win against the Lakers a few days ago. They actually have 6 players currently averaging double digits in points per game right now. Definitely a strong suit. I did have them high in my playoff seeding prediction before the season started, but definitely didn't expect them to get off to this hard of a start. Donovan Mitchell, again, has been playing aggressive as usual and leading this team. So they right now deserve to be in the number 2 spot. At number 3, we got to go with the reigning defending champions. That is the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics right now are 5-1. And as expected, Jason Tatum is putting the league on notice. I think he definitely felt disrespected by his lack of play time in the Olympics. He's currently leading the team in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. Now, for some players who are on terrible teams, that's not really a big deal. But considering the depth that Boston has, that's kind of scary. I think he's averaging 31 points per game right now. Again, it's pretty sick to be leading a team with that kind of depth in all 4 categories. He's definitely come out aggressive in every game, no matter the opponent. They did have that one loss in overtime to Indiana, but other than that, they've pretty much been dominating every team that they've played, even during times when other teams have gotten like up for them. I know when they played Detroit, the game was close for longer than people expected, but they're closing games, and like I said, Jason Tatum has been on a tear, so they deserve to be at the number 3 spot for now. At number 4, this one might be a surprise to some. I have to go with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, the Lakers are currently 4-2. They did lose 2 games in a row. One of those losses is to the team that is going to be in the 5th spot, but they also beat that team earlier in the season. And I do, even though they technically have a worse record than that team, I do feel like overall they're still playing a little bit better than that team right now, so they deserve this 4th spot. LeBron is obviously LeBron doing his usual things. His points per game right now is lower than it has been, but I think for him, his focus is just kind of being that midline consistency, making sure everything is working the way it's supposed to be, being the coach on the court, as an extension of JJ Redick, which JJ Redick to me has done a good job so far to begin the season, really orchestrating the team, getting things in place and stuff like that. They did a good job of getting the whole LeBron and Bronny thing out of the way in the first game. Bronny did come in garbage time in one of the losses and scored his first bucket also. So it's a good way to kind of put that on the back burner so they could just focus on wins. The most impressive thing, though, is Anthony Davis. This Anthony Davis that we're seeing is the Anthony Davis that people have been dying to see forever. Right now, he's averaging 31 points per game and 12 rebounds and 2 blocks per game. Obviously, we don't expect this to continue all season. Obviously, there's always the risk of Anthony Davis getting injured, but if he plays even the same amount of games that he played last season and continues on this pace, the Lakers are honestly going to be pretty scary because AD with this type of dominance and LeBron we know has another level. Pretty scary. So for now, the Lakers deserve to be in that number 4 spot. And at number 5, I got to go with the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix Suns are currently 4-1. Their only loss being to the Los Angeles Lakers. Like I did briefly mention in the Lakers part, they did also get their lick back, so to speak, by beating the Lakers in a close game a couple games ago. So they look good so far, 4-1 to start. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are both averaging 26 points per game. I mean, you're pretty much going to be in most games if your 2 big stars are averaging 26 points per game. I mean, 52 from 2 people is pretty impressive, especially considering their third best scorer is averaging, I believe, just over 18 points per game is Bradley Beal. Obviously, the biggest concern with Phoenix is injuries. The reason why I actually excluded them from my playoff predictions before the season is because I felt like they were just bound to end up with an injury between the big 3. Devin Booker doesn't have a huge injury concern. He has been injured, but he's the least of the concerns in terms of injuries. But between KD and Bradley Beal, I just expected that one of them was going to end up with a severe injury, which was going to affect the flow of everything, and they were going to miss the playoffs. But so far this season, they are proving me wrong, and deserve to be in this 5th spot right now with a 4-1 record. Okay, so to get into the worst 5, we got to start off at the 26th spot is the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks right now are 1-4. They started off the season with a win and have since lost 4 straight. They really just look discombobulated, not the team we were expecting to see, especially coming off of the disappointing end to their last season. Right now, they have the 3rd worst point differential in the league, which is definitely unexpected. And there just hasn't been consistency throughout every game. In their last game, Damian Lillard only scored 4 points, which is just completely unacceptable. I believe he was like 1 of 12 from the field, which is crazy. So Milwaukee's definitely got to get it going, especially with Doc Rivers' track record. I mean, if they continue to look like this, I think he's definitely going to end up being out of a job and maybe out of coaching for the rest of his life. This is definitely, in my opinion, his last stop. So Milwaukee's got to get it together. For now, they deserve to be in that 26th spot. At 27, I got to go with the Detroit Pistons. Detroit Pistons currently are 1-5. I mean, this is pretty much expected. Detroit was one of the worst teams last year. I don't think anybody really expected them to drastically improve this year. Right now, Cade Cunningham is 4th in the league in turnovers per game. Now, obviously, that's going to happen when you control the ball more often than not. It's the same reason why James Harden is leading the league in turnovers per game right now, because he's essentially the ball dominant player on the Clippers team. So that to some degree is expected, but you don't want to be top 5 in turnovers per game regardless of the reason. Right now, Cade is 4th in the league in turnovers per game, and they are 1-5, with their only win being against a team who was out their biggest star, who was also in this bottom 5. So, like I said, they deserve to be at that 27 spot. At number 28, we got to go with the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are also 1-5. Their defense has been atrocious. They have the worst points per game allowed out of every team. They're currently allowing 125 points per game. That's absurd. It's absurd to have a team score 125 points, even though in today's age, teams are scoring over 120 more often than they have in the last 10 years or so. But to have an average of over 125 points per game allowed is just god awful, because there's also a win in there where a team scored less than 100. So in reality, in their losses, the average is probably around 130. So really, really terrible. Toronto's defense has got to get better. But for now, with that record and that points allowed, they deserve to be in the 28th spot. At 29, we got to go with the Philadelphia 76ers. The 76ers right now are 1-3. Now, obviously, a big part of this is they don't have Embiid. There's talk about he might come back to play today or tomorrow. We'll see. Right now, they are 1-3. Their biggest thing is they don't, to me, have the depth to truly compete with Embiid out. Right now, they only have 3 players in double figures. And yes, Maxi's playing great. I believe he's averaging over 30 points per game. But that's not going to be enough to beat any significant team. They look out of sorts without Embiid. And I do expect them to change, but based on the way they've played so far, they got to be in this spot at number 29. But they're not the worst team in the league right now. At 30, definitely has to be the Utah Jazz. They're the only winless team still remaining in the league. They are 0-5. They have the worst point differential of any team in the league at negative 17 points per game. Think about that. They're averaging losing by 17 points per game. By comparison, the second worst point differential in the league is around 8.6 points per game. Negative 8.6. So they have double the margin of the second worst point differential team in the league. It's just awful. 0-5 to start. Obviously, nobody's ever gone 0-82. They're definitely going to win some games. I don't know if they're going to challenge for the record for least amount of wins in a season, but with this type of point differential, it's definitely on the table. So they've got to get it together. But for now, they deserve to be in that 30 spot, the Utah Jazz at 0-5. Okay, so now we're going to quickly get into my picks for Sunday. We're going to jump right into my pick 3. So to start with my pick 3, I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals are favored to beat the Las Vegas Raiders by 7 at home. Now, there are a lot of people that are picking Vegas as an upset alert, mainly because the Bengals have not won a single game at home this year. I just think ultimately it has to end tomorrow. This is the best chance for them to get a win. Las Vegas hasn't really looked strong offensively, and I do feel like Cincinnati's D-line will be able to get after Gardner Minshew, and I think that Cincinnati will be able to score enough to keep the Raiders at bay. I don't think that Cincinnati is necessarily going to cover the spread, but I do think they'll get the win. It does look like T. Higgins is going to be out again, so that does put more pressure on Jamar Chase, but Joe Burrow already came out and said this is a must-win game. I know he wants to stay in the mix in order to get into the playoffs because essentially his legacy is pretty much propped up based on the fact that he was able to beat Mahomes in a playoff game. So if they're not even making it back to the playoffs, it really kind of starts to put his resume in a different light. So I do think they'll be able to hold on and pull off the win at home this week against the Raiders. The next game in my pick 3, I'm going with the Los Angeles Rams to win on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Rams are favored to win by 1 point. Seattle is at home coming off a huge blowout loss, so I think this is going to get them more motivated. I do expect this to be a tightly contested game. It is a rivalry game, division. The division as a whole is tightly packed. 3 teams are all tied at 4-4. The Rams are in last place at 3-4, but again, they've played one less game than everybody else. So this game not only will get them back in that mix, bring them to even 400, but it will knock another team below 400. So huge game for the Rams. They're back at full strength offensively with both Puka and Cooper Kupp playing again. They showed how well they could look last week on a short week against Minnesota. Now they're traveling on the road, but having the extra couple days I think will help really kind of galvanize the team back together and look like the playoff team that a lot of people predicted before the season. So I'm taking the Rams to beat Seattle on the road. And the last game, part of my pick 3, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs to win at home against the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Chiefs are favored to win by 8.5 points. I don't think they'll end up covering the spread. Chiefs historically, are not really great against large spreads. And with this game being against another team who is fighting for playoff position in their division, I think that Tampa Bay has looked better than a lot of people expected. Even with their injuries, I think their offense is still productive. I have said before the Chiefs have the best defense in the league to me, so I think that that's going to play a big factor, but Tampa Bay still has a lot of explosion on offense. Bucky Irvin has looked great out of the backfield. Baker Mayfield has played some of his best ball all season, so I do think they'll keep it close, and even if it's a situation where the Chiefs are up in the fourth quarter by 10, I think Tampa Bay might get one of those late scores, kind of similar to how the game played out last week with the Raiders, and Tampa Bay will lose by less than 8.5 points, but I do think that the Chiefs will still hold on for the win, so that is my last pick as a part of my pick 3. Now for my lock of the week. The lock of the week, I was kind of torn between a couple of games. I could definitely see this team fumbling and losing this game, but I'm going to stick with it based off of how they looked last week. So I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles as my lock of the week. They are at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Philadelphia is favored to win by 7.5 points. Like I said, coming off a huge win against Cincinnati last week, I think that definitely got them motivated. I think it got a lot of that talk of Sirianni being fired kind of on the back burner. Nobody's really thinking about it. They're leading their division right now. Well, I believe they're tied with Washington. Either way, they're at the top of their division fighting for the lead. And I think knowing that Washington was able to squeak out a win last week, they know they got to keep the pressure on to end up winning the division. I just feel like Jacksonville is so up and down. They're not consistent. I do feel like Trevor Lawrence has looked better recently, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to keep up with Philadelphia's offense. I feel like Philadelphia is going to be able to run the ball down Jacksonville's throat. Saquon Barkley, I predict to have over 100 yards from the scrimmage. So I'm picking Philadelphia as my lock of the week. And then lastly, I got to get into my underdog pick of the week. Again, my underdog pick of the week has to be a team that's favored to lose by more than 3 points, and I'm picking them to win. In a way, you could say this is slightly borderline, but it still fits into the criteria. I'm going with the New England Patriots as my upset pick of the week against the Tennessee Titans. New England is on the road against Tennessee. They are favored to lose by 3.5 points, which is still more than 3 points. So I'm going with New England Patriots. I do feel like this is a battle of bottom 5 teams. Both teams have looked horrible for the most part, but I think that New England's offense with Drake May and even with Jacoby Brissett in the last game has picked up more and more confidence. I feel like they were really inspired by Mayo saying that the team was playing soft. They've been playing tougher. So I think they'll be able to take that into Tennessee and get the win, even though they're not favored to do so. I just haven't been impressed with Tennessee's offense at all. Even with Will Levis not starting anymore, I still don't feel like they'll be able to do enough. And New England is in prime position to get the upset. So that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share as much as possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.